Hey everybody, it's Cinnamon Cooney the Art Sherpa, and today I'd like to show you how to paint this stained glass window of the Sacred Heart in a stone wall. It's super easy, it's super accessible, and it's a lot like a coloring page. So if you've ever liked coloring before, you're going to find a lot of things that you like about this. No drawing. What do I mean? Well, you got to check out what's coming up so you know what I mean. All right, get your paint, grab your brushes, let's take a look at the materials list, and I will see you in a second. So what I love about today's lesson is how convenient and accessible it is. How this is going to work is that I'm going to do something and then you're going to do that thing. I'm going to do another thing and you're going to do that. And together we're going to create a painting. Our materials today are a lot of fun, and like I promised, this isn't really going to take any drawing. This is more like coloring, but doing it with paint. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about is the canvas board. See how that's thin and is rigid and has this coating on the surface and the texture? These come in flat packs. They're really easy to get everywhere. They're easy to store, they're easy to frame, and they're easy on the pocketbook. This is an 11 by 14, which is going to make it really easy for the next part. The tracing. So what I want you to do is take your traceable that you can get at TheArtSherpa.com. Print it out on an 11 by 14 sheet of paper and place it centered where the circle is centered on your canvas. Now, mine is one of the prototypes, not the beautiful traceable that you will get to have. And I've taped it down. I'm going to probably also tape it a couple other places. And the reason that I tape is so that it doesn't creep on me. I don't want any creeping on my tracing. So I'm going to tape that down. What I've done to the back so I can transfer the image is I've colored it with just a regular number 2 pencil. That's all I did. I just colored the back of the image with a number 2 pencil. Now, you may have heard in your life, someone may have said it to you when you were young, that tracing is cheating. But I worked a long time as an artist, and I'm here to promise you, not only is it not cheating, it's something that we have to do in the art studio all the time. This is just an art skill, and it has no more or less importance than any other art skill that you might learn along the way. Now, I'm going to very carefully trace over my image. I'm using a blue pencil here because it lets me see where I've already traced, and that's helpful to me. And I'm pressing down fairly hard, and I'm going to make sure that everywhere I've got a black line, I trace on it. Now, I'm an adequate tracer. I know some people that are brilliant at it. Just tracing along my traceable, and you can see already that the tape is helping me. Let's get this all traced on so we can get to the next part. So when you get to the end of the tracing, carefully look at your paper and make sure that you went over every line on your traceable. Now, I'm only going to take off my bottom tape at first to check the transfer of my image. And that's mostly if I can get the second piece of tape off. And I see that that image has transferred very beautifully, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. You can take this time to, in this one particular case, sketch this in more firmly if you're having trouble seeing it. You know, going over it with your pencil, or go directly to the blacklining stage, which sets up the stained glass look, and that is my favorite. Let's come over to the paint palette, and I'm going to show you the materials we're going to be using in our acrylic paint today. Now, I have a pretty bright color palette, and that's because this is like coloring with paint, the stained glass effect, and so there's lots of wonderful bright colors to use. I have phthalo green, phthalo blue, Dog's Inning purple, Cad Red Medium Hue, or you could use Cad Red Light Hue, Cad Yellow Medium Hue, Yellow Oxide, Titanium White, Burnt Sienna, and this is a soft body fluid paint. This particular one right here, Carbon Black, but you could use Mars Black or Bone Black in this case. And I like the fluid or soft body, which is like what you see in a craft paint, because it's going to give me a very fluid line for my black lining. Now I'm going to pick out a brush that's going to give me a good line that kind of reminds me of leaded glass. And for that I'm going to be looking for a small bright. I have a nice number 2 bright here. You can see that. It's just a small square bright. This is a well-loved brush. And I'm going to come and prime it a little bit, which means I'm going to put it in my cup of water, but I'm going to take all the excess water off. And I'm going to load it up just on the tip of my bristles. Then I'm going to come to my leaded lines, and I'm going to be working away from my hand because I have a tendency to rest my hand on the canvas and allow it to drag. So very carefully, just paint in your black lines that you have traced on. That's all you've got to do. Because we're going to be painting inside of these, you don't really have to worry about how perfect they are, because you're going to be going over this space again, probably to touch it up with the fluid black paint, to give it that finished, really resolved look. I'm painting on the edge here to get the wide line. See how I do that? And I kind of paint on the tips of the bristles when I want a thinner line. If you're using too big of a brush, you may find that this is difficult, and my recommendation there would be to switch to a smaller brush. So by now you're starting to realize that it's like you're creating your own coloring book that you're going to be coloring in with paint. You can just see me finding those lines and carefully letting them in. It's okay that this has a hand-created look and not a machine look, because stained glass is very, very hand-created. So the imperfection of things will serve you very well. You can use the reference photo in case your lines have gotten so light that you're feeling a little bit lost in the pattern. And feel free to look at that whenever you need it. I have one off to the side, and you have one right now on your screen. Lots of artists use reference photos, and it's okay. Let's just line this all in black. When you have that lined in, I want you to look at it. If you have small, imperceptible, tiny boo-boos, don't worry about them, because as you add the color paint, you're going to be refining. But let's say that you made a big mistake here. That happens in art, and I can show you how to fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to dry it. Once acrylic paint is dried, you get to paint over it, which is one of my very favorite things about this paint, is the ability to fix mistakes. It's what I love. So all you've got to do is pick up a clean brush and some white paint and just paint this out. That's all you've got to do. It doesn't have to perfectly disappear in any way. You just want it to be lightened enough so that when you come over with your very bright colors in the center of the heart, it doesn't show through. check for mistakes. I see where I've made one, and there's not really mistakes in art as much as things that we intended to do or didn't intend to do, and they're always fixable and correctable. The outside around this window is going to be all black, so that's going to be really easy to paint in. I'm going to use a number 10 bright, but any brush that you have that you feel comfortable with is going to be fine for this. I'm going to just paint everything back here with this black. This is going to make a nice base for our stones, which we can sketch in with chalk. And I don't want you to worry if you're like, oh wait, that sounds like drawing. Don't worry, it won't be. If you've ever made an amoeba, you're going to be able to pull off stones. And stones come in so many shapes and so many sizes. They're very, very forgiving anyways. Whoa! There we go. Lock it down. Just painting that in. Your goal here on the background is just cover the white of the canvas board and try to prevent those little pinnings. Sometimes with some black paints, it can take 2 coats. That's just about your paint and how much pigment in it. It's not about how talented you are as an artist, so don't be stressing about that. Let's dry this so I can show you how to sketch in the really cool stones. So I'm going to show you every part of how to sketch in the stones. I'm going to really talk about it. And I really think you're going to be able to do it at home. Even if you're really new to painting, I think this is a really achievable skill. But if you'd like to know more about how to paint stones, I have more videos just on that subject, which you can find in the iCard, in the description below, or on TheArtSherpa.com. I'm going to use a charcoal pencil. This is a white charcoal pencil, and it's just a really poshy version, kind of in a sense, of kids' chalk, which is also perfectly acceptable to use here. And I've even seen people put chalkboard chalk through an eraser. So you can get, I'm not an eraser, a sharpener, so you can get a sharp point. But I've got this tool here, and so I'm going to use what I have. You use what you have. We're both going to be okay. I'm going to come here to the middle, and I'm going to move this forward so you can really see the work that I'm doing. I'm going to move this forward just a titch, just for this, and then I'll lock it back into my easel. I'm going to come here in this center space, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to make a really irregular shape. So I'm taking it up and down. Ooh, spit at me right there. And now I'm going to give this guy a friend right here. It's going to tuck in, and he's going to make an irregular shape, and maybe he's going to curve up. This is a little bit like playing Tetris. Because if I were a stonemason, I'd be looking for rocks that were irregular shapes that would fit, I'm going to curve around this, each other. See that nice shape there? Now you could have a small stone that tucks in here. The mason would cut this in a curve around the window, and they would kind of tuck in different shapes around each other. I'm going to maybe arc this up. This is about creating weird, unusual, irregular shapes. In fact, not being able to draw sometimes is really great right here. I'm going to add a little small stone, and you can always add a little small stone when you need it. I'm going to fit a little friend in here. And he's going to be that kind of a shape. And you're just going to go around this whole canvas making these irregular shapes. When you come here around the skinny little sides, just make sure that you leave room. That might need a little rock right there. For this deep, deep grout color that we've created. I might come here on the edge and add a little stone friend. They all live together on the wall. See how stone-like these are? Now you can use the reference image that we have here to get this exact effect, but you don't have to make exact copies of what I'm doing. Your painting can be unique to you, and it's perfectly okay and it's perfectly valid. And these are some safe places if you want to experiment with what you're doing with your art to kind of see what original stones you can create. I'm going to create these. So I have those laid in, and I'm going to create the layered effect in dry brushing that makes my stones. It's a lot of fun to me. I'm going to do a number 8 bright, but what you want is a bright brush or a square brush with a nice edge, a firm filament that you feel like you can control in the space, the sizes of these stones. I'm going to make one of my very favorite grays, which you're going to think is interesting. It's phthalo blue and burnt sienna. I'm going to add a smidge of white to that, and you're going to be surprised at how gray that is. And I'm going to come inside the shapes of my stones that I sketched in and dry brush, which means that there's no water on my brush. I didn't prime it in the cup. I didn't moisten the paint. I'm pressing very lightly and allowing a lot of the canvas underneath to show through. In fact, I really don't want to paint all of the canvas. Now you might be a little worried about the white between your stones, but don't be, because either you can come back and paint the grout between the stones again, or at the end of this, use a mildly wet washcloth to wipe up the chalk. When it's all dry, of course. Has to be dry or it's just going to take your paint everywhere. And that wouldn't be fun or enjoyable at all. So I'm just mixing that color again and again as I need it. And if you'll notice how I do this is I come and I get a little bit and I bring it over to its friend here and I mix a color and I say, oh, that's a little too brown. And I'll come over and get a little blue. And when I find a color that I like, I go, yeah, that's good. I'm going to mist my palette. What this is a mister, and it can get really dry in my studio, so sometimes that helps. I don't like it to do too much during dry brushing because I don't want the paint to stop being dry. There's about 3 layers to the stones to really get this effect, but none of them are particularly hard. I'm going to just paint right in here. And these lines that I made, they're just a guideline to help me really create my stones. Right? So let's do this first color through all of these. So now we've roughed those in, they're kind of rock-like, but not completely rock-like. And that's because rocks are kind of colorful fellows. And you got to make sure that you have those layers and colors and depths and dimensions in them. So that's what I mean by these generally take like 2 or 3 layers. Now when I'm adding the next color, I'm going to talk about it again at the beginning about how I'm making those decisions, so you know how you can make them in your own painting too. Let's get that next color. So I'm going to pull out a little of my brown and just a smidge of my blue, but I want it to be much more brown than the gray color I first mixed. You can see me pulling it out here. This reminds me of chocolate. My brush is loaded on both sides, but still dry and haven't rinsed it. I'm going to come here and I'm going to want to paint maybe towards the back of my rock. Imagine that there's light coming out from this window, shining on these rocks. There will be a lighter edge on all these lips facing the window, and they'll be a little darker at the back. And this brown will be part of that darker at the back color tone that's going to make these feel like real castle stones. So I'm just coming here, but I'm going to let that be because I know I'm going to come back with some highlights right there. And I don't want to put too much brown, right? Because then I'd paint out all my work. But what if I did? What if I put too much brown? Let me show you what would happen if I put too much brown, right here. Doesn't look that bad, but I could always take a little white onto my brush, which would get me right back to that first gray, and just lightly dust some texture into it. So you can go, you probably want to put this everywhere now because it's such a good, yummy color. I'm going to pull out my brown again, still not rinsing my brush. I'm going to add a little bit to this little fellow here and keep adding these colors around. You'll notice that I'm very lightly dusting the rocks, mostly to the back side. Little tapping brush strokes, tap, tap, tap. Just nice. Some people really enjoy the sound a brush makes on the canvas. Little blue, little brown. Still want it to be more brown. Same down here. And if you were to paint your rocks together, don't worry because you could just come back with the black again and reinforce that wonderful grout feeling. I need to move this up because my painting edge wasn't covered. So I've just scrumbled. That's where I'm just scrumbling this brush all around. That was really good. That was really good. I like that. Now I'm going to add a little highlight. I'm going to get a little of this yellow oxide. My brush not washed. Look at that. But see how the pigment on my brush already got that. But what if, I know some people have this going on. Let me see if I can create it. See how this is all over my brush and they're trying to paint? It's like that. You got too much paint on your brush. How would you fix that? You could rinse it off in the cup, or you can wipe it off on your paint towel. So if you ever find that the paint is creeping up and getting all up in here, you're just loading too much up on your brush. Just wipe it off and start again slowly at just the edges of the brush. So still my brush is quite, you can see, even with the wipe off, it's still quite dirty. I'm going to add a little white to this. And I'm going to highlight. See, just dusting the edges of the stones. Not perfectly to the edge, like I'm catching ridges and elements. I like to imagine that in my mind. Art is about valuing imagination. That can be hard in real life, isn't it? To evaluate imagination. This one right here as well, just on the inside edge. Let's go around all of these with this color. Well, now we have a little bit of sunlight on our stone, and we just have the last bit, which is a very light kind of gray to stoneify, which is a technical term, our stones. So I'm going to show you how I mix that and how I apply that to the rest of the stone to finish and resolve this look. I haven't rinsed my brush. I'm going to just pull out some of my brown onto it. You can see it's about halfway up the bristles. And I'm going to come over to my blue and just get a little bit of that blue pigment on my brush. By moving in small amounts, I can really control it. And I'm going to pull out the white, quite a good bit of white. This is a pretty light gray I'm making here. You can see how far it is on my brush. And I'm going to just add this to the surface of my rocks. So see how light I'm dusting? This is a project of gentleness. How gentle can you be? Just around, you can see it's just taking the surface of the canvas texture. And I do that by just barely touching my brush to the canvas. It's a very gentle process. To be really honest, I enjoy it a lot, this part of the creation. Creating the stones. If you feel like you need to move a stone over, you can do that like I'm doing right there. Just dusting. The load is so light on my brush. Wow. I think we have some really wonderful castle stones surrounding this beautiful glass window we're creating. Now we're going to paint in the Sacred Heart, which is the fun part. And we're going to do that with a number 4 bright because that's the brush I feel like I've got control over on a canvas this size. But if you need a smaller brush, you go ahead and grab that. I'm going to wipe off and make sure my number 4 is clean. And I'm going to do the heart. And the heart is a lot of fun. I'm going to take a little of my yellow over to my red. And I haven't really mixed them together. You'll notice they're just kind of swirly there on my brush. I might even grab a touch of white. And I might need to mist my paint. There we go. I'm going to come right here. Just start painting in my heart. And the reason that I want, and if you see this, things to be very streaky is stained glass is streaky. I'm going to get a little more of my red here. And a little more of my yellow. Just letting it color in. Softening the edges between these two. Moistening my brush, getting a little more red. Just enjoy painting that in and the beautiful color and painting inside those lines. Now remember, if you accidentally boo-boo a line, paint over it, you make a mistake, it doesn't really matter because you can just paint it back. This is the thing I love about acrylic paint. The no mistakes, no worries. And remember, you can't judge this journey by this first step. You don't know how good at art you're going to be. Imagine if you judged riding a bike by the first time you tried it. Unless you were one of those people that just like immediately rode a bike. I know I wasn't. I know I had to try a couple times. Just painting around. Just paint that in. Wiping off my brush. If I feel like I need a little more yellow in there, I can just add it right on the top. Look how that goes. And it's okay that it's like swirly and not perfect. That's not something that I am concerned for. And I will do the whole bottom now. Well, that looks really beautiful. Let's see if we can add a little depth and dimension to it. Let's wet our brush a little bit and come over to our Dog's Name Purple. Pull some onto our brush, just a smidge, into our red. This can make a really strange color, but it will deepen the red in a way that can be beautiful. And let's just add a little bit of that dusting depth right here to give the glass some color and intensity. Not everywhere, and just a little bit. See how light my brush strokes are? I'm just trying to create some dimension to the glass. But I don't want to gray it too much because the heart needs to be very bright. I'm going to want to add the In the Vines red, so I'm going to get a smaller brush, my number 2 bright. I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to let that dry and find its center. I'm going to add some fire up here in my heart. So first, I'm going to get my Dog's Name purple. Just at the base of this. This flame, and a little bit this flame. And a smidge this one. I'm going to add this dark, almost a ruby color. I'm going to rinse off my brush. Pull out I didn't rinse. I wiped off my brush. I'm going to wipe off my brush and then just slowly blend in. Really, right here, I'm feathering very softly. Wipe off my brush again. Grab some of my CAD. I'm going to just take that all the way up to the edge of the flame. I'm going to do the same here. I may need to go back and add some of my leading, which is just my paint. That right there. There we go. Can add the leading when I'm done. People are going to be so excited when they see this. And now I will work this flame at the bottom with just the CAD. Here, just CAD. And right there, just CAD. I'm going to wipe this off. Pick up my yellow. But see, there's small amounts of pigment on here. That way, when I paint them together, you can see they blend right on the canvas. Now you know what I mean by it's a lot like coloring. If you're good at coloring, this is probably going to be one of your favorite painting projects. Now I've got a lot of that red on this brush, so I can just go forward because it's tinted and do bottom of this with just yellow. Do the bottom of this with just yellow. Right? Wipe it off. Not rinse, just wipe it off. Get the white paint. And look at this. It just blends right there. Just pulling this really helps me get the effect. That I'm looking for. And I might even take a little of this yellow, just loading it on my brush a bit. Come here. I only want a little bit, so I had to wipe off the extra. And I might just softly add this little drama right here. That looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. By now I think that the red is fairly dry, but I'm going to let it go longer. And the reason I'm not going to go for the green thorns right now is that red and green, when they mix together, can gray out. And we don't want our stained glass to gray out very much. So I'm going to rinse this, and I'm going to do my radiating light and my beautiful blue sky. Now my radiating light is going to be interesting to do because I've got to make it seem different than the flames that are coming up. I'm painting this just in with the CAD. Just painting that in neatly with the bright cad yellow. I'm going to come over here and add another little stripe of that, just the same. And remember, we're going to fix our leading. I'm going to come and add 2 down here. But this time I'm going to just shade half of it. See, I'm just shading. Just tapping in this side of the space. I'm going to wipe off my brush and go get some white, pure white, and paint in these little squares of glass. Again, don't stress if you have little areas where the paint goes over, it's not neat, because we're going to neaten it up. We're going to tidy it up at the end. There we go. Just blend those 2 edges using the tips of the bristles there on your brush, and you see that gives you a nice blend. I wet my brush and come up top. I haven't rinsed. I've just grabbed more white paint and I'm painting in these rays. Just putting this beautiful light ducky yellow in that letting. Every once in a while you'll see me dip my brush in water just a small amount and then drag it off, and that's just to improve the flow. But a lot of that is that it's very dry in my studio. You may not need to do that at all, except for rinsing out. I'll wipe off a little bit. Grab some of my yellow. Mist my palette because hot. And dry. It's the and dry that gets you. And paint in some bright yellow up top. I'm not that worried about being perfect. Alright. Add another little. See, sometimes you'll be adjusting. You kind of want, you're like, oh, it needs to be different. You make it different, you make corrections, don't worry about it. Now I've got 2 more down here I need to deal with. So I'm going to take a smidge, the smallest amount of my cad, over to my yellow, and it's going to give me ever a slight orange. See how barely orange that is, but it's very bright, like a tangerine. I want a light one. You can do this. You got this. Now, I'm going to use a little of my blue and white to create the beautiful kind of cloud and sky effect. I've got my number 4 bright again. I'm going to pull out just a dusting. You can just see it's barely on the tips of my brush. Some of the blue, I've loaded a bead of white. I'm going to come here and just let the paint swirl and blend on the canvas a little bit. Picking up a little more white on this one. I'll come here, paint this one in, and then his little friend next to him. I want some of my pieces of stained glass to be light. I'm going to grab some more white, and some to be darker. Just not worried about it being perfect. I want to add some of this lighter color down here. Just white. Picked up a little yellow on the brush, and that's okay. And down here. I look for places that need balance and a little bit of adjustment, and that's how I pick where the colors go. I'll wipe off my brush a little bit. Add more blue, but less white this time. And paint in some of these other squares carefully. Now, believe it or not, these two spots are thorns, so I won't be painting this with the blue. Picking up a little more white. It will still be quite darker than my other sky. Wiping off my brush. How are you guys doing? Hopefully good. Coming here. Slightly darker bits of glass. Will really pop. Okay, I'm going to wipe my brush. The heart is starting to look pretty good. We're definitely going to need to clean up our leading, but when it's all done, it's going to really pop. I haven't really rinsed my brush off, and I'm going to grab a little blue and a little purple and a good bit of white. Make sure there's enough fluid on my brush for it to flow. And I'm going to paint the outer leading. Glass between these spaces in this window. Had a little boo-boo there, but I'm not going to worry about it. I get the streaking by how I'm mixing the brush. I'll wipe off. I'll get a little purple. I'll get a little blue. And I'll grab a bead of white. Okay, I'm going to get a small detail brush, about this big. This is a number 6 round, but what I'm really looking for is something about that large in relationship to my finger that comes to a nice detailed point. I'm going to get it a little bit wet, take off the excess, and come over to the yellow. And I'm going to very carefully, but not too worried about it, paint in my thorns. You see me is rolling off the extra paint and just trying to load it up on the tip there. Some of these will be bright green and some of these will be a darker green. So I caught a spot here that I painted red that actually needed to be green. I'm going to go back and paint that green. That works for me much better. That's going to happen in painting. You're going to get a little lost somewhere in there or get a little relaxed, and maybe you go back and you say, no, I'd rather have that be another color. And that's what I love about acrylic. If it's dry, you can paint over it. Now the last part is a very important part because this is the part that makes the piece look so perfect and fun to look at, and that's going back and cleaning up the black lining so it looks like the leading in glass. And how I do that is that I take my fluid paint and I get my detail brush, which is this little guy here. This is a 10/0. I can hardly even see the small, but this is one of my faves. And I'm going to, but any really tiny, see, it's just a very tiny little, almost like what you'd use for liquid eyeliner. Any of those will work. I'm going to put out fresh paint because my paint's been doing what's called skinning. Which basically means that it's drying on the surface. And I'm going to start just coming back with this and creating a nice black line where I had initially put them in and give it that beautiful, beautiful leaded look. You can see I'm just putting a bead on the brush. There we go. Cleaning up that line. I'm just going to show you a little bit more. I'm just putting this on the tip and just looking for places that I can make the leading seem smoother, where the paint isn't going over it so the glass seems set in it. And this is why I wasn't so worried when I was painting it, because I knew I could do this. Just loading this on the tip of the brush. This isn't the only way to do this. This is my way, and I'm sharing that with you, but you might have another way. I've been having a lot of fun doing this with you, and I really enjoy sharing art. If you enjoy this project and you'd like to see more like it, be sure and hit the subscribe button, like button, share button, and tell me what you'd like to paint in the comments below, because believe it or not, it's your comments that help direct the kind of things that I paint here, because it's really interesting to me to know what you want to create in your art journey. So that's what I'm always looking for, and I do read all of them, and I do appreciate all of them. Let's get this thing lined in. Well, we got through it, didn't we? And it really wasn't that bad. I want to show you a couple things. One, we're going to sign the piece, and one, I just want to show you how to take the chalk off if you need a little help doing that. So what you can do to take off chalk is a soft cloth and a little bit of moisture. And you can lightly dab it off your canvas. See, it'll come off. Not a hard cleanup at all. Now some paints do what's called underbinding, and acrylic paint shouldn't do that, but still it happens sometimes. And if you notice any paint coming up on your cloth, instead of lifting the chalk up with a moist cloth, just go back and paint it out with the black grout color. And so that's your two ways to get rid of your chalk lines. That was really fun. I feel like we've got to sign it. I always like to sign my pieces someplace interesting and unexpected, and also to think about the piece that it's on when I do it, so that my signature feels considered. I think some artists are masters at this. Some artists like to put their signature in different ways or not at all, and all of those things are okay. There isn't really a right or wrong. There's just your art journey. That's beautiful! I'm so happy with this. I hope you enjoyed painting this with me today. I hope it was a surprising project that you didn't really think about before. And now your brain is going, woo, all the things that I could do. That's what I'm hoping I sparked in you. Be good to yourselves. Be kind to yourselves. Make time for creativity in yourself, because that can restore you in such a profound and powerful way. I'm looking forward to creating with you again. So I'm going to see you at the easel really soon. Bye.